Okay, so Friday we talked about our stems, and so the function of the stem is to take the water from the roots, which we'll talk about next, but it's going to take the water and it's going to help the water travel throughout the plant and put it where it's needed, either during photosynthesis or transpiration. Your stem is also going to carry glucose and make that glucose travel to where it needs to go, usually in the roots where it's stored as starch. So you have two parts of your stem. You have the xylem and the phloem. Those are also found in our veins when we were talking about the leaves, and we were talking about how leaves have veins. So you basically can think of the stem as the arteries inside your body. So they are the big blood vessels, so they're larger. And then those arteries are going to eventually branch off into smaller capillaries. So the veins in the leaves you can think of as capillaries. So they're made out of the same thing. They're both made out of xylem and phloem. So xylem is going to be in charge of transporting your water throughout the plant and either take it to the cells for photosynthesis, or it's going to take it to the leaves for transpiration. Remember, transpiration is just the evaporation of water from the leaves, and this is how our plants are going to stay cool during the day. So water is actually a very good molecule that absorbs heat. So it's very good at absorbing a lot of heat energy. So what's going to happen during transpiration is as this water is traveling through the plants, as it's doing that, it's going to grab on to heat energy, or it's going to absorb heat energy from the plant. And then when it evaporates, that heat energy is going to evaporate along with the water. So it's basically how you guys, when you sweat, that is how your body cools off. So you're not technically cooling yourself off. It is just the heat energy in your body leaving your body through water, through sweat. So you can think of transpiration as just a plant sweating. Okay? So it's just a way for water to be evaporated and heat to be released during that evaporation. Okay? So those are your vascular bundles. The vascular bundles inside the stems hold the xylem and the phloem. So xylem carries water, phloem carries glucose. And then just like we have different types of fruit, we have different types of stems. So these are two different types of stems. This is your rhizome type of stem. So these are the roots, but this thing is the stem. And then a potato is an example of a tuber stem. Again, these are the roots, but this long part where the potatoes are going to branch off from, that's just a modified stem. So what you have to realize is anytime you eat a fruit or a vegetable, you are basically just eating a modified part of that plant. Okay? So a potato is just a modified part from a stem of a plant. Yes?
So it's kind of like a seed in a sense. Because you just put it in the ground and it grows.
Kind of, yes. A different type, yes. Yeah. And then you have these type of stems. So these are going to be kind of your vines, where they're going to reach out and they're going to kind of use their environment to hoist themselves and to support themselves. So this is another type of stem. And then a runner type of stem. Runner stems are usually found in plants that do not grow up, they grow out. So what's going to happen is your stem is going to grow across the ground, and every so often it's going to put roots into the ground at that point. So again, these plants are not going to grow up, they're going to grow out. And then finally we have these couple of different types of stems. So this looks like an onion. So an onion is another type of modified stem that you eat. Again, these are the roots, so you're not eating the roots, you're eating the stem. Or this is the stem and these are the leaves. But this is a different type of stem. This is also a different modified part of a plant that you eat. And then you have these type of stems. Okay? Alright. So lastly, the last part of the plant are the roots. And the overall function of roots are to allow nutrients and water to be drawn up into the plant. Okay? So the main function of the root is to bring in water. That water is going to be used during photosynthesis. That water is also going to be used during transpiration to help the plant cool down. But roots are also going to absorb other minerals, not just water, from the ground. Okay, so roots are in charge of making sure the plant gets water and nutrients from the environment. So then we have things called meristems. Usually we're going to look at the apical meristem, but a meristem is the way that plants grow. So plants are going to add tissue onto the very tips of the stem, so the very top part of the plant, they're going to add tissue onto the very tip of that. So that is a meristem. And then they're also going to add on tissue to the very bottom of their roots. Bless you. So they're adding, bless you. They're adding on to the top of themselves and to the bottom of themselves. So they're growing in both directions. So this is how plants grow. They just add tissue onto the two opposite ends of their structures. And those are called meristems. So meristems are just the extra pieces of tissue that are going to be added to the tips of the plant. Okay. So your meristems do not have any role in photosynthesis or transpiration. It's just a way for the plant to grow. So nothing to do with photosynthesis, nothing to do with transpiration, just helps the plant grow. And then just like fruits, just like stems, we do have also different types of roots. So our typical root system that we all think of is known as a taproot system. So those are our typical roots. We have our adventitious roots that go along with usually our stems that are going to grow out. Those are the roots that they're going to make. And then we have our fibrous roots. Usually your fibrous roots are the weeds that you easily pull out of the ground. Those are going to be fibrous roots. There's a lot of them. They're very small, but they tend to be able to reach further. They tend to be able to reach out farther so they can grab more nutrients from the environment. And then we have these two as well, but we don't really see those that often. It's usually these three. But yeah, different types of roots. All right. So I'm going to go back real quick and recap plants. Okay, so plants, you have flower, leaf, fruit, stem, root. Those are the different parts. You need to know the function of the overall function of those different parts. And then you also need to, looking at those individual parts. So first we looked at the flower, and the flower is where our reproductive organs are located. Every flower has both male and female parts, and we have sepals, petals, stamens, pistils. So you need to know what those are. You need to be able to look at a picture of it and pick out where it is. And you need to know which one is the male part, which one is the female part. And then we talked about leaves, and we talked about the different parts of the leaf that you're going to have to know. So those are guard cells, stomata, epidermis, xylem, phylum, and transpiration. So remember, guard cell and stomata work together. So stomata, also called a stroma, is just a hole in the leaf. That hole serves as a way for carbon dioxide and oxygen to go in and out of the plant, and it also serves as a way for water to be evaporated during transpiration. The thing that controls the hole is the guard cell. So the guard cell is going to control and either open that hole or close that hole, depending on if the plant needs more photosynthesis, or if it needs more transpiration, or if it doesn't need either of those things. That's the job of the guard cell, is to either open the stomata or close the stomata. And then we have our epidermis, which is just like the epidermis on your skin. So this is basically the skin of the leaves. It's there to protect the leaves, and it's to keep everything in. And then we have xylem and phloem. So what does the xylem carry throughout the plant? Water. And the phloem carries glucose. So xylem, water, phloem, glucose. Okay. And then we talked about fruits. Their main function is to protect the seed. What part of the plant are you eating when you eat a fruit? You're eating the ovary, or the female part of the flower. So, like I said, anytime you eat either a fruit or a vegetable, you're eating a highly modified part of that plant. So when the plant is fertilized, it's going to make a seed, and then it's going to cover that seed in fruit. And that is what you eat, and that is how it gets its seeds to be put other places to grow. Okay? So, make sure you know the function. I showed you different types of fruits. You do not have to know that for the test. I just thought it was interesting to know the different types of fruits. And then we talked about stems. So make sure you know the function of the stem. Make sure you know that the xylem and the phloem are also located in the stem. Which one carries what? Okay? There are different types of stems. You don't need to know this for the test. And then we just talked about roots. Make sure you know the function of the roots. I showed you types of roots, but those won't be on the test either. Any questions on plants before we move on? Okay. So, let's go down. Okay, so the second part to this unit are our biogeochemical cycles, also known as just biochemical cycles. So biochemical cycles are going to look at the living part and the non-living part of nutrients that are going to be cycled through the environment. Okay, we have the carbon cycle, so this one just looks at carbon. And it's going to look at how carbon is cycled through the environment. We also have the phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle, the water cycle, and the oxygen cycle. So all of these cycles are looking at these individual elements, or these individual molecules, and how they are transferred between different things within the environment, and how they cycle through the environment. The carbon cycle and the oxygen cycle are usually going to be looked at together, because they're going to make carbon dioxide, and they're also going to be coming together to make glucose. So a lot of the times your carbon and your oxygen cycle are looked at together, because they play, what am I trying to say? They're usually together in the cycle anyway, so they're looked at together. Okay. So this is just looking at how nutrients, how matter is cycled throughout our environment. What you have to realize is that these cycles happen throughout the entire biosphere. So our planet, Earth, is a biosphere. So these cycles are happening all throughout the planet. And what you are doing in one area will very possibly affect the environment of a very different area on the different part of the Earth. Because everything is cycled throughout the entire Earth, not just where you are on Earth. Okay? So again, we have water cycle, carbon cycle, oxygen cycle. Usually these two are looked at together. And then nitrogen cycle and phosphorus cycle. So those are the ones that we have to look at. So our first one is our water cycle. You guys should have seen the water cycle. You should have been taught the water cycle before now, so this should be kind of a review for you. So we're going to start in our oceans. Water in the ocean, because that's where most of our water is found, is in the oceans. The sun is going to heat up our water, and it's going to cause the water to evaporate. The evaporation of water is going to collect in the atmosphere, and those water molecules are going to travel across the atmosphere, and as they travel across the atmosphere, they're going to get other water molecules, and they're also going to get dust particles, gas particles, anything that goes into the air, into the atmosphere. Those water molecules are going to surround and collect and get into a giant group. Those giant groups form clouds. And then eventually, once those clouds get big enough and they get heavy enough with those water molecules, then that is when we have precipitation, either in the form of snow or rain or any other type of precipitation that we might have. Hail is another type. Anyway, the water molecules, along with everything that is collected, is going to fall back down to earth, to the ground, and it's going to find its way back eventually to the ocean. So it's going to travel down through the flow of gravity, through lakes, streams, rivers. It's going to flow underground until eventually it's going to meet up with our oceans. And then once it gets to the ocean, it starts to cycle again. So this is why it's very important to realize everything that you are putting down the drain at your house is going to go back into the ocean. And everything that companies, big companies, everything that they put in the drain, everything that they put into our water supply, those are eventually going to find its way back into the ocean. So that's why it's very important to keep track of all the waste material that you are putting down drains, because those drains are going to eventually lead into the ocean. Yes? So typically what happens where you find deserts is on one side of a mountain. So we have two mountain ranges. Everything in the middle of those mountain ranges are usually drier areas. So the water, or the water vapor, yes, the water from the oceans that is evaporating is going to collect in the atmosphere. It's going to travel inward. And then once it meets those mountain ranges, it's going to fall. But it's going to fall on one side. So that's why everything to the east of those mountain ranges and everything to the west, everything that faces the water side has more access to water. It's more tropical. It's more green. Everything on the other side, because the water doesn't get to that side, that's where you have your drier, more desert climates. Okay? So that's the water cycle. Now you still can have rain. You don't need a mountain range to have rain. It's just depending on how much precipitation these clouds can hold. Once they've reached their limit, then that's when it rains. But usually when they hit that mountain range, that causes the rain to be released. Okay, so our next cycle is our carbon and oxygen cycles. Again, these are very typically looked at together because carbon and oxygen are going to come together to make carbon dioxide and glucose. So you kind of typically have to look at these two cycles together. So we have a small cycle that is the relationship between carbon dioxide and oxygen that we've already studied. This was our cellular energetics unit. So the process of photosynthesis, making oxygen and carbon dioxide, or making oxygen and glucose, and then the process of cellular respiration, taking that oxygen and turning it into carbon dioxide, and then that cycling. So you have a small cycle between oxygen and carbon dioxide here. That is just one part of the giant cycle that is the carbon cycle. So this part is just happening right here. So plants can only take in so much oxygen. So that extra so much carbon dioxide, Plants can only take in so much carbon dioxide. All that excess carbon dioxide is going to be released into the atmosphere. Also, when animals create waste, or when they die and start decomposing, there is carbon in that material, and that carbon is going to find its way into the soil. Eventually, what's going to happen is that carbon is going to find its way into some water system, so like a lake or a pond, and it's going to settle to the bottom. And after a long period of time, once you have a lot of carbon kind of pulling together in one area, that is where you have fossil fuels. And so we as humans are going to go get those fossil fuels. We're going to burn those fossil fuels. That's called combustion. And during combustion, you have what you're making as carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide from the fossil fuels that were in the ground are going to make their way back into the atmosphere. And then the CO2, CO2 in the atmosphere is going to find its way back into the soil through animals and through other geographical changes. And then it's going to be one big cycle. So you have a small cycle happening between carbon dioxide and oxygen, but you have a larger cycle happening between plants and animals and water and people and all this stuff. So the water cycle happens pretty quickly, pretty regularly. The carbon cycle, because it is a long-term cycle, the carbon cycle is going to occur over a longer period of time. Obviously, the fossil fuel deposits are going to take a long time to accumulate in order for us to go and get those fossil fuels. Has everyone taken the Unit 8 test online? Okay. If you have not taken the Unit 8 test online, it will close tonight after midnight. So you need to take the Unit 8 test online tonight by midnight. Everyone is taking it online. No one has taken it in class. You need to take it online tonight by midnight. Okay. Continuing on with our carbon-oxygen cycle. So, like I said, the long-term cycle includes us taking those fossil fuels that we find in the ground, burning those fossil fuels, creating more carbon dioxide, which we're going to put back into the atmosphere, and it's going to join up with the rest of the cycle. You also have carbon cycling through the environment in the form of calcium carbonate. So calcium is going to come into contact with oxygen and calcium, and it's going to make calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is what makes up shells. So shells in the ocean are going to fall to the bottom of the ocean. And then eventually, due to geographical changes, those shells, once they decompose, they're going to find their way back up to the soil. And then through erosion, so water is going to erode away, and that's how the carbon in the calcium carbonate gets back into the environment. There is a picture in your textbook of, I think it's called the White Hills of Dover, but the White Hills of Dover is a cliff by a body of water, by the ocean, and it is pure white. So those cliffs are pure white because they are made out of pure calcium carbonate. And so the water from the ocean is going to erode away those cliffs little bit by little bit, so that calcium carbonate is going to find its way back into the carbon cycle. Yes. 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 cycle is the nitrogen cycle. So again, we're going to look at how nitrogen, up here, like I'm up here. So now we're going to look at how nitrogen is cycled throughout the environment. So nitrogen starts in the atmosphere as nitrogen gas, which is N2. So 2 atoms of nitrogen are going to be bonded together. It's going to go through a process called nitrogen fixation, where it's going to be turned into what's called ammonia. Ammonia is the molecule of nitrogen and hydrogen. So nitrogen and hydrogen are going to meet up in the atmosphere, and they're going to make ammonia. And ammonia is going to be converted into nitrogen, oxygen containing molecules, so either NO2 or NO3. That's going to happen in the soil. So the nitrogen fixating bacteria that's in the soil is going to use the nitrogen gas from the atmosphere, and it's going to convert it into ammonia first, and then it's going to convert it into nitrogen oxygen compounds. That process is called nitrification. The NO2, NO3 molecules is what plants are going to use. So plants can absorb NO2, NO3 molecules and use that nitrogen for growth and other things. And then the animals are going to eat the plants, and they're going to use the nitrogen in those compounds. Any NO2, NO3 compounds, any of these left over in the soil, or anything that is absorbed by the soil by animal waste or animals decomposing, is going to be turned back into nitrogen gas by a process called denitrification. Again, there are bacteria that are going to turn those nitrogen-oxygen compounds back into nitrogen. So you have nitrogen becoming ammonium, becoming nitrogen-oxygen compounds, going back to nitrogen gas, and it is a cycle. I think Wednesday we are going to do another Achieve 3000. I know, we have to. So Wednesday, I'll double check and let you know tomorrow, but I'm pretty sure Wednesday we'll be back in that lab classroom down there in the 900 building. So we'll do that on Wednesday. So tomorrow we will finish the PowerPoint, and I will give you the worksheets to start on. Wednesday we will be doing Achieve 3000, and then Thursday we will do review because your test is on Friday. Okay, one more cycle that we're going to look at before you leave. It's going to be the phosphorus cycle. So the phosphorus cycle again is going to look at phosphorus and how it is going to be transferred throughout the environment, much like the nitrogen cycle. So you have a short-term cycle over here, but you also have a long-term cycle in the grand scheme of things. So your short-term cycle is going to be somewhat like the nitrogen cycle, where you have animals, either they're going to create waste products or they're going to die and decompose, and that's going to put phosphorus into the ground. There are going to be bacteria, or usually it's some type of fungus, that's going to break down those organic molecules and release that phosphorus into the soil. Those plants are going to use the phosphorus to grow. Animals are going to eat the plants, and then it's going to be its own little cycle. So that's a short-term cycle. The long-term cycle is if not all of the decomposers, not all of the bacteria or the fungus breaks down that phosphorus or whatever is left over in the soil that doesn't get used by the plants. It's going to eventually find its way into our water systems. So usually like a lake or a pond, any kind of like standing water, it's going to fall into the water and it's going to fall to the bottom and be considered a sediment. So it's going to fall to the bottom. It's going to be part of the sediment of this lake or pond. And then due to geological changes, so the earth itself is moving constantly, so that phosphorus is going to find its way back up to the soil, and it's going to be used from plants, and it's going to kind of go back into this cycle. So you have a short term and a long term. Also, we as humans use phosphorus a lot in fertilizers, phosphorus and nitrogen. So that's going to add to the cycle as well, where that's going to fall into our water system and then fall to the bottom as sediment and then be put back into the soil, used by animals, used by plants. Again, it's a cycle. Okay, so tomorrow we'll finish this and then we'll start on the worksheets. Wednesday we'll probably be doing Achieve 3000, and then after we're done with Achieve 3000, that will give you more time to finish the worksheets that I'm going to give you tomorrow. And then Thursday we will review, and then Friday is your test. Okay. If you did not take the Unit 8 test online, you need to take that tonight before midnight.